You remember the day the sky broke. It was not an explosion. It was a soundless crack in the heavens. A line of impossible blackness split the blue. The world held its breath. Then the shattering began. Reality tore like old paper. Shards of other skies appeared above you. You saw a sky with two suns. Another was a deep, venomous purple. A third was filled with impossible clockwork gears. They all bled into your own familiar blue. The fracture was not loud. It was deeply, terribly quiet. The world lost its sense of solid ground. Your neighbor's house flickered for a moment. It was replaced by a marble column. Then it snapped back. Everything felt unstable. Time itself had come undone. Earth's single steady timeline was gone. It was now a million echoes of itself. And you were standing right in the middle of it all. You were there when Earth shattered time. The first real proof came 3 days later. You were in the ruins of New York City. The buildings were a strange mix. Glass towers stood beside stone aqueducts. A yellow taxi was half buried in a sand dune. The air smelled of ozone and dust. Then you heard them, the sound of marching feet, the rhythmic clank of metal and leather. It was a sound from a forgotten age. You hid behind a rusted-out city bus. You peered through a shattered window. A Roman legion was marching down Fifth Avenue. Their red banners snapped in the wind. A golden eagle standard gleamed in the strange light. They moved with perfect discipline. A centurion shouted orders in harsh Latin. They looked just as confused as you felt. They stared up at the broken skyscrapers. They pointed their sharp spears at a flickering traffic light. This was not their world. But now, somehow, it was. This was the first echo. It would not be the last. Then came the silence from above. 1 week after the fracture, they arrived. Their ships were not metal. They looked like frozen music in the sky. They hung motionless over every major city. They absorbed all sound around them. No doors opened, no ramps lowered. The beings simply appeared on the ground below. They were tall and slender. Their bodies seemed woven from starlight and shadow. They had no faces, only smooth, polished surfaces that reflected your own shocked expression. They spoke without moving. Their voices echoed directly in your mind. The words were not English or any human language, but you understood them perfectly. They called themselves the Keepers. They brought a terrible message. They said the fracture was not a natural event. It was an attack. Something had wounded the universe itself. And your world, your Earth, was bleeding timelines. They were here to observe the end. Or so they thought. The Keepers studied the chaos. They watched dinosaurs hunt in Parisian parks. They saw Viking longships in the Panama Canal. They observed timelines mixing and overwriting each other. Most creatures caught in the flux were lost, their minds shattered like the sky. But humans were different. You were different. The Keepers focused on you. Their silent, featureless faces would turn to you. They watched you navigate the broken world. You remembered the world as it was. This memory was a shield. While others went mad, you held on. You saw a Roman legion and knew it was wrong. You saw a futuristic soldier and understood they were out of time. Your mind did not break. It held a clear image of what reality should be. The Keepers were fascinated. Their star science had no explanation for this. In a universe of shattered constants, you were an anchor. Your consciousness was stable. It was a single, unwavering point in a storm of temporal energy. This made you both an anomaly and a hope. The Keepers changed their mission. They were no longer just observers. They decided to teach you. They showed you how to use your unique mind. You were not just a passive anchor. You could be an active force. Your first lesson was simple. A small park nearby was flickering. It shifted between a modern playground and a prehistoric jungle. A pterodactyl kept trying to steal a child's swing set. It was a little funny until someone got hurt. The keepers urged you to focus. You closed your eyes. You pictured the park as you knew it. The green benches, the worn-down slide, the sandbox. You held that image in your mind with all your will. You pushed that reality outwards. You felt a strange pull, like flexing a muscle you never knew you had. The air shimmered. The jungle ferns receded. The screeching pterodactyl dissolved into motes of light. The playground settled back into place, solid and real. You had done it. You had bent a piece of the world back into shape. Your power grew stronger with each passing day. You could mend larger and larger fractures. But the keepers brought you another grim truth. The fracture was not a random wound. It was caused by a predator. They called this enemy the Vex. They were beings that lived in the wounds of space-time. They did not build or create. They only consumed. They fed on the chaotic energy of broken timelines. Earth was now their perfect hunting ground. The keepers showed you a vision. It was a world they had failed to save. You saw a planet of crystal cities. Then you saw the Vex arrive. They were not a fleet of ships. They were a swarm of living fractures, gaps in reality that devoured light and matter. The crystal cities dissolved into screaming paradoxes. History was eaten. The future was erased. All that remained was a dead orb. It was a silent void drained of all potential. The Vex were coming to do the same to Earth. They were coming for your home. You knew you could not fight the Vex alone. The keepers could only advise. Their laws forbade them from direct interference. The fight had to be yours. Humanity's fight. But humanity was scattered across 1,000 histories. You had to build an army from broken time. You stood on a bridge between worlds. On one side stood Marcus, a Roman centurion you had convinced to trust you. He and his legion were now staunch defenders of their new home, even if they still did not understand hot dogs. On the other side stood Commander Eva Rostova, a soldier from the year 2370. Her uniform was powered armor. Her weapon fired plasma bolts. She saw the fracture as a tactical nightmare, but she saw you as a strategic asset. Getting them to work together was a challenge. Marcus thought Eva's rifle was black magic. Eva thought Marcus's obsession with shield formations was quaint. You had to be the bridge. You convinced them that their survival was linked. Future soldier and ancient warrior, they would fight together for Earth. The Vex did not wait long. They sent a scout to test your world's defenses. It did not arrive in a ship. It simply appeared in the middle of your new settlement. A swirling vortex of wrongness. It looked like a man made of broken glass. Each shard reflected a different, dying world. It was a creature that fed on moments. As it walked, the ground aged to dust beneath its feet. Then it would reverse, becoming primordial ooze. It looked at a young shock trooper. The soldier screamed as his memories were pulled from his mind. He aged a decade in a second. Then he became a child before fading away. Your Alliance soldiers opened fire. Roman Pila bounced off its shimmering form. Plasma bolts were absorbed into its chaotic core. It seemed to laugh, a sound like grinding timelines. It was not just a monster. It was a localized extinction event. It turned its fractured gaze towards you. It sensed your power. You were the anchor, the main course of its terrible feast. It lunged forward, moving impossibly fast. It wanted to consume the one thing holding this broken Earth together. You. The Vex scout lunged, but you did not move. You did not raise a weapon. You stood your ground. You met its gaze. You saw the countless timelines it had devoured. You felt their silent screams, but you also felt your own reality. Strong, unbroken. You did not need to learn a new power. You just needed to use the one you already had. You were an anchor. So you anchored. You focused all your will, not on a park, not on a building, but on the creature itself. You imposed your reality onto it, a reality where it did not exist. You imagined a world without a Vex scout, a world where that soldier was still alive, a world where time flowed in one direction. You pushed, harder than you ever had before. The scout shrieked, a sound that tore at the fabric of space. Its body of broken glass began to crack. The stolen moments and memories bled out of it. The young soldier reappeared, dazed but whole. The Vex creature trembled. Then it shattered into nothing. Not even dust remained. There was only silence. On a nearby starship, the keepers watched. And for the first time, their emotionless forms conveyed a single, clear thought: total disbelief. Your victory was short-lived. A keeper appeared before you. Its form seemed dimmer, less solid. It was projecting itself from orbit. The mental voice it sent was strained. It told you to come with it. You needed to see. Your consciousness was pulled from your body. You flew through the fractured sky. You passed the moon. You went into the cold dark of deep space. The keeper showed you what was coming. It was a sight that chilled you to your soul. An armada was burning through the void. It was not a fleet of ships in neat formation. It was a tide of chaos, a wave of Vex entities. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. They were a locust swarm ready to descend upon a field. And Earth was that field. Each one was a predator like the scout you fought. Many were far larger. You saw colossal beings that seemed to swallow starlight. They were a moving wound in the universe, a fleet of pure hunger. This was not a raid. This was an extermination. The Vex had come to harvest Earth completely. You returned to your body. The dread was a physical weight. Your alliance of soldiers was brave. But they were a tiny handful against that storm. You needed more. You needed more than soldiers. You needed legends. You sat and focused your power. You had pushed reality onto a creature. You had mended broken places. What else could you do? You reached out with your mind, not just into the space around you, but into the time that made up your world. You reached into history. You searched for courage. You searched for unbreakable will. You searched for figures whose stories had shaped humanity. You found a spark, a powerful, brilliant point in the timeline. You pulled on it, gently at first, then with more force. You called to it. A figure began to form in the air before you. A woman in gleaming plate armor, a simple banner held in one hand. Her eyes burned with fierce conviction. She looked at you, then at the fractured sky. She was not afraid. Joan of Arc had answered your call. She was just the first. The sky boiled with the Vex arrival. They poured through the atmosphere, not as ships landing, but as reality tearing open. The battle for Earth began. It was a sight no sane person could have imagined. Your impossible alliance charged to meet them. Knights of the Round Table rode on maglev bikes. They held their lances steady against creatures of living paradox. A legion of Spartan warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with soldiers in powered armor. Their bronze shields held back waves of temporal static. Their spears found purchase in nightmare flesh. You saw Leonardo, Da Vinci directing cannon fire. His mind, a whirlwind of genius, saw patterns in the Vex chaos. He shouted coordinates to a crew of Viking berserkers. They howled with glee as they fired the plasma cannons. It was madness. It was glorious. This was humanity's last stand. Every age, every hero, every bit of courage from your planet's long story, all gathered for one final war. You stood at the center of it all. You were the conductor of this beautiful, insane orchestra. But even this, you knew, would not be enough. The Vex were infinite. The Vex swarm was endless. For everyone you destroyed, 2 more would tear through from the void. Your heroes were tiring. The alliance was breaking. Despair began to creep in. It was a cold poison that your power could not fix. You needed a miracle. You closed your eyes amidst the chaos. You reached out not just to the heroes. You reached out to everyone. The Roman soldier, the future shock trooper, the terrified civilian hiding in a bunker, the knight, the Viking, the programmer. You felt them all. A tapestry of human spirit. You felt their fear, but beneath it, you felt their defiance, their will to live, their shared history of survival. You gathered it all, every last drop of courage and hope. You pulled it into yourself. It was a fire that threatened to burn you from the inside out. You held up your empty hand. You focused all of that energy, all of that history, into a single point. It coalesced into a blade of pure light. It shimmered with 1,000 timelines. It contained the first human to make fire. It held the moon landing. It was a weapon forged from the concept of humanity. You called it the Time Blade. At the heart of the Vex fleet was a vast intelligence, the Vex Command Unit. It was a being the size of a mountain, a gaping maw of anti-reality. It directed the swarm with cold, alien logic. It was the source. You knew you had to face it. You rose into the sky. The time blade in your hand did not feel heavy. It felt like a part of you. The swarm parted before you. The lesser Vex could not bear to be near it. You flew towards the command unit. It turned its vast, empty attention to you. It did not attack. It spoke into your mind. A voice of pure entropy. It told you that your struggle was pointless. Your timeline was an error. It would be deleted. You raised the time blade. You answered it with a single thought. No. You did not strike the creature's body. You struck its nature. You plunged the time blade into its core. The blade did not cut flesh. It cut the very idea of the Vex from your reality. You were not destroying a ship. You were editing history. The command unit screamed as its past was erased. Its future vanished. The entire armada, linked to its leader, flickered and dissolved. Their invasion had not just failed, it had never happened. Silence fell. The sky above you was whole again, a single, perfect blue. The borrowed heroes from history faded. They returned to their own times with a final, knowing nod. Your fractured alliance looked around in stunned awe. The war was over. The keepers appeared before you one last time. Their forms were bright and solid. They bowed their heads, an unprecedented gesture of respect. They told you that you had done the impossible. You had not just saved your world. You had mastered a power they could only observe. They offered you a choice. You could join them. You could travel the star-born paths. You could help guard other realities from the Vex and similar threats. It was a chance to become a cosmic force for order, a being of immense power and purpose. You looked down at the scarred but beautiful earth below. You saw the Roman legion helping future soldiers clear rubble. You saw the mix of times beginning to find a new harmony. This was your home. It was broken and strange, but it was yours. You politely declined their offer. You would stay. The keepers understood. They left you, not as a student, but as a peer. You were the protector of your own reality now. You were the guardian of a world that had shattered time and been reborn.